Well, there it's gone, higher and further. I'm sure that must be six. It is. Dickie Bird confirms the same and waves to the scorers at the same time. What a splendid blow.
Without four of their leading players, Captain Richie Richardson, Desmond Haynes, Courtney Ambrose and Winston Benjamin for one reason or another, and against opponents who had not been beaten in a home test for 6 years, the West Indies always knew their tour of India would be tough. Just how tough was confirmed in the first month of a hectic schedule of one-day internationals that ended with an overall Indian advantage of 6-2, and India as champions of both the Wills World Series and the Pepsi Series. In 42 previous internationals between the teams, the West Indies had won 28, India 10. If history indicated that they'd never lost a test in Bombay, the look of a bone-dry, rock-hard pitch that clearly was underprepared heightened the West Indian paranoia that overcomes most teams struggling on foreign soil. It influenced them into the rare inclusion of a specialist spinner in their 11, the Trinidadian leggy Rajinder Dhanraj, to counter the presence of 3 in the Indian side. As it turned out, the pitch was unsatisfactory for Test cricket, especially over the first half of its duration, bouncing and turning extravagantly so that it was not a nightmare only for the batsmen, but also for the keepers, who conceded 41 byes between them. The little Indian Mongia was repeatedly battered about the chest and body, and in the West Indies' first innings, Keith Atherton revealingly called for a protective chest guard. Yet, while it dictated the tenure of the match, it didn't entirely determine the outcome. Bowling first, the West Indies might have thought they were at the Wacker in Perth rather than the Wankhede Stadium in Bombay, so generous was the bounce. And had they bowled and caught better, India would have been fortunate to have reached 100. After Prabhakar prodded Walsh's second ball of the match to short leg, 2 of the most reliable slip catchers in the West Indies team, Carl Hooper and Brian Lara, dropped 2 straightforward chances off Sidhu and Tendulkar.
That's Lara this time, the guilty one there at first slip.
Once they had been disposed of, 3 wickets fell for 3 runs after lunch, but then the solid Mandraker and the adventurous Mongia pulled the innings round with a stand of 136 for the 6th wicket.
Slow ball again, and that's a good controlled shot. Mandraker, although it was a slow ball, let it come on to him.
In the conditions, 272 was a commanding total, and the extent of the batsman's difficulties was emphasised by Lara's tortured 14 of 74 balls with 2 chances. All the main West Indian batsmen, with his exception, got a start, but no one passed 50, Stuart Williams falling 1 short in his 3rd Test innings. India led by 29, but Kenny Benjamin's fast and hostile spell that removed the first 3 Indian second innings wickets for 11 by close of the second day evened the balance.
In the air, he's gone, he's caught there by Hooper running in from second slip. That was a beauty from Benjamin.
A delayed start to the 3rd morning by 45 minutes to allow repaired bowlers' footholds to dry denied the West Indies the chance of bowling with the pitch at its freshest.
Yes, the 45-minute delay seemed unnecessary. We know that the ground authority has something to answer for in the fact that they put those footholds in this morning, and therefore they're too wet.
And India regained the initiative through aggressively brilliant batting from the informed Tendulkar and the bowlers Kumble and Srinath, and another solid contribution of 66 from Mandraker.
Him on strike, look at this charging. Beautiful shot too, split the field.
Left on a likely 363 to win, the West Indies were virtually beaten in the first over when Prabhakar dispatched Simmons and Lara for ducks. As the total declined to 85 for 5, a huge defeat loomed for the tourists, but the left-handed Jimmy Adams and the keeper Junior Murray, with a preview of things to come later in the series, at least saved face, if not the match, with a rousing stand of 162 before they were out in successive overs nearing the end of the 4th day. Murray for 85, Adams for 81.
Oh, that good out, he's gone, and Srinath has got Adams.
And India duly completed their 10th consecutive Test victory at home and their 10th under Mohammad Azharuddin early next morning.
Yes, caught it slip by Tendulkar, and so the final West Indian wicket falls. It's an India are victorious.
In between the first and the second Test, the West Indies had the scheduled preparation of a 3-day match against Bombay, the Ranji Trophy champions, in the southern town of Calicut, but political troubles reduced it to a single day. So Walsh and his team arrived in Nagpur one down and hardly in the best frame of mind for such a vital contest. When they lost the toss on a slow pitch, Tendulkar and Sidhu took to the threadbare bowling with relish in a stand of 177 that set the platform for a total of 546 for 9 declared. The West Indies' longest respite came on the opening day when Walsh, fed up with several similar previous incidents, led his players to the sanctuary of the dressing room after boundary fielders had been struck by missiles thrown from the crowd. The hour lost in 2 interruptions as a consequence would prove vital in the long run. There was hardly a stroke Tendulkar didn't play in compiling 179, the highest of his 8 Test centuries. And when Sidhu was out for 107, Tendulkar and Azharuddin put on 202, and then Mongia and Kumble thrashed 93 for the 8th wicket to add to the West Indian woes. It left the West Indies with the unfamiliar task of batting for a draw. Simmons and Lara both got to 50 and then got out, leaving the reliable Adams conquering the threat of the Indian spin as much with his pad as his bat, to steer the innings to its objective in partnerships of 133 with the aggressive Hooper and 97 with Murray. Unbeaten 125, Adams stayed over 6.5 hours for his second Test 100. Ahead by 118, and with a day and a half remaining, India were strangely overcome by a bout of tactical timidity. Even after Walsh had to retire with a crick neck early in their second innings, they made little effort to push for the victory that would have sewn up the series. As it was, the West Indies had to hang on grimly over the last 2 sessions to carry their hopes of squaring matters into the final test in Chandigarh. The new stadium at Mohali, a suburb of Chandigarh, became the game's latest test venue and, on all evidence, seemed certain to witness the end of the West Indies' proud and remarkable record of 28 unbeaten test series dating back to 1980. But that record had been under threat before, and each time the West Indies had rallied to protect it. They would do so again now. At the final team meeting, Walsh advised his men he had never been in a losing test series and that he would rather go home beaten 2-0 than to go home beaten 1-0. The message was clear, and when he himself declared that he was fit to play and won the toss, his team's spirits visibly lifted. The sight of the first true fast pitch of the tour was another crucial factor. Once more, Adams was the hub around which the highest West Indies total of the series was built, an unbeaten 174 out of 443 all out.
Over the top, in the gap, 4 runs, and that's his 150.
India were indebted to their competitive but ageing all-rounder Prabhakar, and yet again to a couple of tail-enders for drawing to within 56 of the West Indies total. Prabhakar showed great character in scoring his maiden Test 100, since his place had been in considerable doubt, while Srinath once more demonstrated his developing all-round status with an accomplished unbeaten half-century in a record last wicket stand of 64 with Raju. India carried their innings into the 4th morning, seemingly rendering them safe, but it was now that the West Indies were seen to best advantage. In spite of deep-set fields and a deliberately diminished over rate, the West Indies rattled along at nearly 5 runs and over to give their bowlers ample time to launch their final victory assault. As Williams was ill and unable to open, Lara went in first instead. He set the pattern with 4 boundaries in Srinath's second over, and the pace never slackened. Just 9 away from a personally satisfying century at the end of what was a disappointing tour, Lara gave himself out to a fine touch to the keeper, even as umpire Venkatraghavan was shaking his head in refusal. After that, Adams, in different guise to his previous diligent and defensive demeanour, and Atherton added 145 at better than run a minute to allow Walsh's declaration an hour before the end of the 4th day, just as he had planned. India's challenge was to score 358 to win, or to bat 7 hours to draw and take the series. When Prabhakar was felled in the very first over by a vicious ball from Walsh that found a way through the visor of his helmet and smashed into his face, the psychological effect on India's remaining batsmen could well be imagined as he was led from the ground, nose broken and bleeding. Benjamin claimed Sidhu LBW before the close, and next morning India's batsmen had no answer to typically aggressive West Indian fast bowling by Walsh and Kenny Benjamin. 7 wickets fell for 33 in an hour.
Here's Benjamin now to Cambley. Oh, is that gone? And he's gone. He's out. Cambley is out.
As the last pair came together at 68, India were in danger of the humiliation of their lowest ever test total against the West Indies, 75. But Srinath and Raju at least avoided that indignity. But the West Indies would not be denied, and they completed one of their greatest triumphs when Raju was out 5 minutes to lunch.
Kafi has won the match for the West Indies.